Yeah. We're still waiting for more people. Yeah, you can scan. Hey, we have at least one more. Sweet. Okay. Please scan your card so we know you're here. Do you have any friends or classmates that we're waiting for? Do you know if anyone else will come, basically?
No, I don't know others. Are you?
Okay. Maybe let's start and then we'll see if someone shows up later.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome. Maybe you know me already. I'm Marcus, an international tutor here. And I'm going to talk and discuss this topic with you today, pursuing a PhD or EDD. First, I want to tell you a bit about why I chose to design this workshop. Okay, and the reason is because when I was in your situation, when I was in university and I studied, I wanted to have a workshop like this, but no one offered one. Okay, so this is something I wanted to have when I was younger. And I think the reason why no one actually offered this workshop was because it's so varied throughout the world how PhD studies work and what a PhD actually is. Okay, so it's different from country to country. It's different between different cities. It's different between different universities even. Okay, so that might be why it's difficult to make a workshop that covers everything, that gives like a general summary of what it is. Okay, but that is something I've tried to do here. So we're going to cover it in general, I hope. So basically today, I'm going to explain first what a PhD is and what an EDD is. And then we're going to discuss together why you might pursue a PhD. Possibly, I assume since you are here, you're interested in pursuing a PhD or an EDD. So we're going to talk a bit about why one might want to do that. And then also to help you make an informed choice and an informed decision, we're also going to cover why you might not want to do a PhD or an EDD. Okay? Then I'll give you a bit of practical information, so what a general timeline of a PhD or EDD looks like. And then at the end of the workshop, I'm going to give you a bit of time to sort of think about how your own PhD journey might look like if you were to pursue one. And then as usual, as we always do at the ASLC, we'll have a short evaluation at the end. Okay? So that's the plan for today. So first up, I want to talk a bit about the PhD, okay? I'll come back to the EDD later, but let's start with the PhD. Okay? Obviously, PhD is an abbreviation. Okay? It's not there's no word that contains like these 3 letters, PhD, okay? It's an abbreviation of something. Do you know what it is an abbreviation of?
Doctor of Philosophy.
Yes, Doctor of Philosophy. Very good, okay? However, to be even more correct, it's Philosophia Doctor. Okay, that's why it's in that order, PhD, right? And this is a bit of an interesting term actually, because Philosophia here doesn't really mean philosophy as we understand it usually, and doctor doesn't mean doctor as we understand it usually either. Okay, so this is a very strange term, I would say. Actually, philosophy, or philosophia here, comes from the Greek meaning of this word, which is love of wisdom. Okay, philo means love, and Sophie means wisdom, basically. So when we think of philosophy usually, well, I can ask you, what do you think of when you hear philosophy? What does that mean, if I ask you?
Philosophy?
Yeah, what is philosophy?
Very abstract.
Very abstract.
Yeah.
Meaning of life, yeah, things like that.
Where I'm going.
Where am I going? Yes, exactly. Very like abstract questions, right? What is good? What is evil? How should we structure society and so on? Okay, but actually here is not really about that. Okay, it's more about wisdom in general. So, philosophy doctor, that's someone who loves pursuing wisdom, someone who loves becoming more knowledgeable about something. Okay, someone who loves to or wants to be wise about something. So it's a bit of a different meaning because it comes from this word. So basically it means studying one subject for an extended amount of time, usually a couple of years, okay? About 3 to 6 years, depending on where you study and how you study. So I imagine you have some courses right now. Most of those courses probably last for maybe a couple of months or a couple of weeks. Okay, but imagine studying one of those courses for years. Okay, that's basically what a PhD is. So you're focusing on one thing for a very, very long time, and you're digging very deep into it. Okay. Originally, this title, PhD, was a universal license to teach. Okay, that's what it was originally, 1,000 years ago. At that time, it was called docenti. Okay, and it was a title awarded by the Catholic Church in Europe. Okay, maybe you're aware, maybe you're not, but 1,000 years ago, when the first school started to pop up, the churches were the ones who ran the schools, usually. Okay, so most of the things that have to do with education are connected, at least originally, with the churches in Europe. So basically, to get this title, you had to pay a small fee. You had to vow that you were a Christian, that you follow the Catholic faith and so on, and you had to pass a test in law, medicine, and theology. Okay, so back then there were only really 3 subjects. There wasn't any mathematics or biology or anything, just law, medicine, and theology. Do you know what theology is? Theology? It's the study of God, basically, and like religion. Okay? So back then they didn't really divide subjects as we do now. They bunched up everything together into wisdom. Okay? So basically a philosophy doctor was a teacher of wisdom. Okay? Doctor in this sense meant a teacher or instructor. Okay? So actually the original meaning of PhD is a teacher of wisdom. Okay? That's what you're trying to, or that was what you tried to become when you pursued this degree back 1,000 years ago. However, nowadays it's a bit different. Okay? Throughout the years, this title has changed a bit. Okay? Nowadays, it's still a license to teach, right? Because usually you need a PhD to teach at a university, for example. But now it's also a universal license to research. Okay, maybe that's, I would say probably is the primary function right now. So that means that if you want to extend the limits of our knowledge, like mankind's knowledge, if you want to do cutting edge research, you need a PhD, basically. So rather than how it was back then, where you only taught, applied, or practiced knowledge, nowadays it's also about generating knowledge. Okay, nowadays it's about creating new knowledge, very much. So yeah, there are 2 different functions in this title nowadays. Okay, teaching and generating knowledge or researching. And I remember I wrote in the description of this workshop that a PhD is one of the highest degrees that students can attain or something. Actually, when I did more research into this topic, I found out that there's a degree higher than PhD. Okay, so there's something even higher than PhD called a habitation, and basically that's doing a PhD again. Okay, so doing it one more time. But in many countries, the PhD is the highest degree. Okay, so that's the highest thing you can attain. And usually it follows a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, depending on the country or the university and so on. So for example, in the US, usually you only need to have a bachelor's degree to enter a PhD program. And then the PhD program will be a bit longer, maybe upwards for 5 or 6 years. Okay? While in, for example, Finland, I think also Sweden, where I come from, you need a master's degree in order to enter PhD studies. And then the program will be a bit shorter, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, something like that. So it's a bit different depending on where you actually do the studies. In Hong Kong, both models are used. Okay, I think even in different universities. In one university, you could have both models. So yeah, don't worry too much about this, I guess, in Hong Kong. All right. So because the sort of meaning of PhD has changed a bit, originally it was only about teaching, but nowadays it's more about both teaching and research. The name or the title is not really accurate anymore, I would say. It's not only about teaching anymore, right? So it's not only about being a teacher of wisdom. So therefore, many people nowadays talk about research doctorates instead. Okay, so here we have both the teaching and the research in one title, right? And then within that sort of umbrella, we have all of these different titles, okay? PhD is one of them. Probably the most common one is the traditional title. But we also have, for example, Doctor of Social Science or Doctor of Medicine, Doctor of Business Administration, and so on. So there are many, many different types of research doctorates. We also have Doctor of Education, right, which is the second type of doctorate I want to focus on today. What's a bit confusing though is that you can have a Doctor of Philosophy in one of these subjects. Okay, so you can have a PhD in arts, for example. So that means that in many of these subjects, there's both a PhD in that subject and a doctorate in that subject. Okay, usually there's a small difference. Sometimes there's not even a difference. Okay, it's very confusing, I think. But for example, in education, in many universities, there is a difference between a PhD in education and an education doctor, educationis doctor, which is what it stands for. Okay, educationis doctor. What's similar though is that no matter which one of these you do, you will be able to become a scholar. Okay? Do you know what a scholar is? What is a scholar?
Doing research.
Doing research, yeah, basically doing research, working at a university and doing research. Okay, so no matter which one you do, you will be able to become a scholar if that's what you want. So don't worry about that. The difference though, I think in many universities, is that if you do a PhD in education, you're more focused on the actual teaching side of education. Okay, so pedagogy, learning, and so on. While if you do an EDD, that's more for leaders and administrators of education. Okay, so maybe you're into the politics of education, then this might be more suitable for you. Or maybe you want to be a principal or something like that, like a school leader of some kind. So from what I understood, this is the main difference between these two. If you're interested in an EDD, maybe also consider doing a PhD in education, okay, because they're similar, but there are some differences also. Alright, so now before we continue, that was sort of like a general overview of what a PhD is and an EDD. I want to just quickly stop and I want to ask you on a scale from 1 to 10, please write down how motivated are you to pursue a PhD or an EDD right now. Okay. I will come back to this later and we'll see how it changes depending on what I present. Okay. So just write down a number now and we'll see how it changes, if it changes. Do you have any questions so far about, maybe you have many questions, but about anything that I said? Do you have any questions? No? Okay, let's move on to why. Okay, so as I already mentioned, you probably already have some reasons why one might want to do a PhD. Okay, so maybe you can share with us. For example, why did you decide to come to this workshop today?
Because I'm considering to pursue a PhD degree after 1 year.
Okay.
Maybe I will pursue a PhD to get in, begin the study at 2020 September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you want to pursue a PhD? Potentially.
Because I when I joined this university, I found I'm very interested in doing some research in education, and also now I am a middle school teacher. I want to become a university teacher, so I must do it.
Okay, so you're very interested in doing research, in education specifically, but doing research, and you want to do it in order to become a university teacher.
Yeah.
Good reasons. Why did you sign up for this workshop?
I don't know. I'm
Don't know.
not sure yet. I'm still confusing about whether I am suitable for a PhD. I'm confusing.
Confused, yeah. Okay. Why are you interested in this topic then? Why are you considering it even?
Maybe I want to know more information about what is PhD or EDP.
Yeah. Okay. Good. When I thought about this topic, I decided to divide my reasons into two parts. Okay. So I have the motivation from society and the motivation from myself divided. Okay. Because I think they're quite different. They are related, but they're quite different. Okay, so for example, for society, why would society want you to pursue a PhD? Well, the most general and fluffy answer is that society wants to extend the limits of our knowledge. Okay, society wants to know more and develop our lives, like make our lives better, right? That's like the most basic, most general answer you can find. But if we shrink the perspective a bit to, for example, countries, an individual country would want you to become a PhD because that makes the country more competitive. Okay, for the same reasons basically. Okay, a country wants to be more knowledgeable than other countries. A country wants to have access to more resources and more ideas and so on than other countries, right? And similarly, one city might want to be more knowledgeable than another city and so on, and even universities can compete, okay? And this is related to a third reason, which is to avoid brain drain. Have you heard this expression, brain drain? What does brain drain mean?
It's like some knowledgeable people, like some doctor students or master student, they get they
Tell you something and you
no, they go to other cities, yeah, or go abroad. 人才流失.
Yes, exactly. Very good. I'll give you an example. Okay, so I think during World War II, there was a brain drain in Europe and a brain gain in America, meaning that many well-educated people moved from Europe to America, to the US. Okay, so that probably made the US more scientifically advanced, more scientifically developed than the countries in Europe at that time. Okay, and that can be very attractive for a country or a city or a university, right? And if you have, so another point to consider here is that if you have a lot of already very well-educated people in one area, that attracts other well-educated people to come to that area, right? So if you have a large established pool of doctorates of well-educated people, you will probably get more well-educated people. Okay, so that's one reason to educate these doctorates in the first place. Okay, to attract more. Usually, it's a good thing to attract well-educated people. Okay, because that raises economy and so on, right? So I think for society, these are a couple of reasons why society might even want to consider this. Okay, because in a sense, giving someone 5 years to study whatever they want, basically, is in one sense a waste of money, and a waste of resources. Like if someone wants to study, I don't know, squirrels for 5 years, is that really helpful to society? It's difficult to say, right? But for these reasons, society might still consider it. Okay. So then we come to the personal motivation, and again I decided to divide it into two parts, okay? Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Have you heard these words? You have, okay. What do they mean? Tell us.
Intrinsic means your you know it from your personal reasons, and you won't do it just because yourself. That's the
Extrinsic.
extrinsic reasons are some other reasons, the people around you, or the society reasons, or just your families. They give you influence, yeah, or push you, or just motivate you from other people's angle.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, intrinsic comes from the inside,
Yeah.
and extrinsic comes from the outside.
Outside.
Okay. I still think these can be personal. Okay. As you say, extrinsic has a lot to do with society, but many of the extrinsic motivations can also be personal. Okay. I'll give you a couple of examples. But first, let me tell you some intrinsic motivations. Okay. So one very obvious motivation is that if you do a PhD, probably you're making a notable contribution to mankind. Okay, your life really matters. Okay, you have made a contribution that will last forever, or like that is notable somehow. Like people, if you're doing it very well, people will remember you in the future, right? So that can be a very good intrinsic motivation, right? Feeling that you made something worthwhile. Okay. I think many people feel like they haven't really done this in their lives. Okay, so this is an opportunity to do that. A second thing is a PhD allows you to pursue your passion. Okay, so as I told you earlier, for example, the squirrels, if you're very passionate about squirrels, it might be difficult to sustain yourself, like find a job that has to do with squirrels, that allows you to pursue your passion related to squirrels, right? But in a PhD, you can do that, okay, for 5 years plus, maybe. So I think this is a very strong intrinsic motivation too, okay? Then we have flexibility. PhD studies are actually quite flexible, okay? Because you decide when you want to do things, okay? What your schedules should be and in what order the different things should come, okay? So if you're a morning person, you can wake up at 4 a.m. and work until, I don't know, 4 p.m. If you're an evening person, you can sleep until 10 a.m. and work until 2 a.m. Okay, you decide. And you also decide, you can decide how long the PhD studies will take you. Okay, it doesn't have, like, even if the program says that it should take 4 years, probably they are a bit flexible. They can allow you 5 years or 6 years. Okay, so it's up to you. It's a very flexible occupation. Then fourth, which is related to what I've said previously, you will learn something if you do PhD studies, okay? Because that's like the whole point of doing a PhD, okay? To extend the limits of our knowledge, to come up with something new. Okay, so not only will you learn something new, everyone else will also learn something new if you do it right, okay? But for you at least, you will learn something new, okay? So maybe you enjoy this. Like me, for example, I really enjoy learning, whatever it is. Okay, so maybe for you it's similar. You just like learning and you want to learn something new. And this is not only related to your passion or your subject, say squirrels. It's also about, for example, writing. Okay, because you will do a lot of writing, you will do a lot of reading. You will also do things that will happen in the future if you decide to become a scholar, right? So like writing grant applications or scholarship applications and things like that. Actually, in general, you could say that a PhD program is training to become a scholar, right? So all the skills the university wants to see in a scholar, they train you in here, right? It's a bit of a training to become a scholar. So you will learn all of those skills, okay, and that could be very useful. But then you can also improve yourself, right, on all of these skills. Not only about learning, maybe you already knew how to write very nicely, but you can still improve on those areas, right? Yeah, so I think these are some good intrinsic motivations. And then many people also have extrinsic motivations. Okay, so for example, you might feel peer pressure from friends or family or colleagues or whatever. Maybe, I don't know, I guess most Chinese people don't really have a lot of brothers and sisters, but in many other countries, a whole family can be very well educated, and if you're the one who does not, has not pursued a PhD, you're a bit different, right? So that could put a lot of peer pressure onto you. Or maybe all your friends have done a PhD and you have not. Okay, so that could create a bit of peer pressure. Another reason, which is surprisingly common actually, is that many people do a PhD in order to keep their visa. Okay, because if you get accepted into a PhD program, you can say to the government, the like immigration authorities, that you have a stable occupation for 3, 4, 5 years into the future. Okay, so pretty long time into the future. So actually, many people use these kind of studies as a way to secure their place in the country, to secure their visa. So that's another extrinsic motivation. A third one is social status. Especially in meritocratic societies. Do you know what that is, a meritocratic society? It's a society which values achievements very much. So for example, I used to be an exchange student in Singapore. And Singapore is a very meritocratic society. Okay, they really value achievements. So especially in those kinds of societies, having a PhD, just like being able to say that you're a doctor, that might give you some kind of social status. Okay, it might make you more well respected in society. In other countries, it does not matter at all. Okay, no one cares. But in some societies, it do. And then a fourth one might be that a PhD could improve your career prospects. Okay, so for example, if you want to teach at a university, probably you need to get a PhD. Okay, I will come back to this later though, because this point is a bit debatable. What I want to say now though is that I think, in my opinion, many of the extrinsic motivations are not that good. Okay, meaning that if you only have these motivations, if these are the only motivations that drive you forward, it will be very difficult to sustain yourself throughout the 3 to 6 years that it takes to complete a PhD. Okay, I think you need at least one of these also, okay, in order to sustain yourself. So if you don't have any of these motivations, then I don't think a PhD is for you, in my opinion. Okay, don't rely on these, basically. Are there any other reasons you can think of why one might want to pursue a PhD or an EDD?
Are you pursuing a PhD?
No, but a good question. I have been thinking about it for a long time, so that's why I'm a bit interested in this topic. Yeah, but
So you're going to do it in the future?
Maybe, yeah, that's what I'm considering. So all of these things I have considered myself also. Maybe I'll do it next year, maybe I'll do it sometime in the future, maybe I won't do it at all. I don't know. Anything else? Any questions about anything? No. Do you agree that these are bad motivations, or do you think that they are good?
I think many friends around me, they are motivated by the
Extrinsic motivations.
yeah,
Okay.
extrinsic motivations.
Any one in particular?
Particular, I think maybe it's because the peer pressure and their career prospects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to escape these kinds of motivations. So probably you will have these also, but I think if you want to pursue a PhD, you need at least one of these, preferably more than one, but at least one of them. Alright, so let's move on to why not. let me ask you again. Why should you not pursue a PhD?
Because I don't know how to apply a PhD, or I'm not sure what time should I apply for this.
Okay. Yeah, good.
Are you a master's student?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you can do it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because master degree is enough for the PhD application.
Yeah. Even a bachelor's degree can be
Yeah.
enough in some
So
places.
time is not a problem.
Another reason is I want to have some work experience in kindergarten course,
Okay.
because my major is early childhood education.
Okay, good reason. Do you have any reasons why someone
Why
might
not?
not want to pursue a PhD?
I have many friends. They are very excited to become PhD, but after they they become PhD students, they will feel very upset about the tons of readings. Yeah, very dry, very boring research, and even when they finish their program, they will quit, and they quit what they have done before. For example, one of my student, not my student, one of my friend, he is a biology student in PhD, but after he finished his learning, he became a financial person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he quit all his research, and he found he hates all. But at first he loves his research. So yeah, it is very how to say, unpredictable.
Yeah, unpredictable. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good reasons. To add to that, very good reasons. So that's a risk, right? There's a risk that you might like the subject might not be that interesting as you thought. Okay, that's a risk. Another risk is that you might be assigned to a bad supervisor. Okay, I don't know how much you know about PhD studies, and I will explain later. But basically, you will be assigned a mentor, maybe even more than one, maybe 2 or 3. Okay, someone who will supervise you throughout the journey and help you and give you feedback and so on. Okay, and if you are assigned a bad supervisor, that can really affect both how well you do and how much fun you have, how much you enjoy it, right? I will say that basically always it's possible to change the supervisor, okay? But even if you change it, you have wasted like 6 months dealing with this one bad supervisor, and yeah, that will, like 6 months is a pretty long time, and that might have turned you off of this like whole project and everything. So this is a big risk, I think. Another thing is that PhD studies can be very slow, okay? Not only because they take 3 to 6 years, as I told you earlier, like that's the ideal usually. Many times it will take longer than that, okay? For different reasons. Maybe you get married, maybe you get children, and that takes a lot of time and so on. Maybe you just think it's too much work and you have to take a break. So actually when I did research for this, I saw that less than 50% of PhD students actually complete their degree on time. Okay? The rest take longer. So this is a very slow career option. Okay? You have to plan for the possibility that it will take you 7, 8, 9, 10 years maybe. Okay? And that's a quite big chunk of your life, right? So do you really want to invest all that time into this project? If you're passionate, maybe you think that's good. If you're not, maybe not, right? Also, if you're worried or if you care a lot about how much you're paid, I think this is not really a good option when it comes to money. Okay. Obviously, if you get a PhD, you will get, well, no, I shouldn't say that, but you will get, like, a PhD will increase your leverage when you negotiate how much you're getting paid in the future, right? But while you are a PhD student, you're not getting paid very much, right? Sometimes actually you're not getting paid at all. Okay, so you have to rely on scholarships or I don't know, your parents' money or a part-time job or something while you're doing the PhD studies. Many universities offer financial support, but it might not be very sizable, or it might be limited somehow, or tied to how well you do. Okay, so I think especially during the time when you're actually studying, you're not gonna get very much money, right? Your financial situation will not be very good. It will be okay, but not as good as if you had worked in like a regular job outside of academia at the same time with the same experience. So that's something to consider. Another thing is that there are very few stable jobs in academia. Many jobs in academia, in the academic sectors, are things like teach this course for 3 semesters, or be part of this research project that stretches from 2018 to 2020. Okay, so meaning that many of the jobs are temporary. Okay, so it's quite difficult to find a stable job. There are not very many stable jobs in academia. So if you're concerned about this, if you want to have a stable future where you're not moving from one place to another or from one workplace to another, then yeah, consider this also. Okay? Then it might not be for you. One reason for this is that there's an oversaturation of doctorates, research doctorates, in many fields. So like a field is like biology, education, engineering, and so on, and also in many countries. And exactly which fields are oversaturated and not, I don't know. Okay, I can't tell you, I'm sorry. But maybe you can find this information at the employment department's website or something, or maybe you can ask a career supervisor or something here at the university to give you this information. Okay, so look into this before you pursue a PhD, I would say. Also, in different countries, the level of saturation is also different. Do you know what saturation means actually? Maybe not sure. Okay, saturated means that it's full, basically. Okay, so it's like a fancy way of saying full. So if you have a glass and it's full of water, then it's saturated, you could say. Yeah. And then oversaturated means then that it's more than full. Okay. So for example, the market in the US, at least during these years, was very much oversaturated. Okay. So for every one new position, there were 7 research doctorates being educated. Okay. Yeah, so to give you an idea, this is from education, but probably you can find a similar picture in whatever field you're interested. So there was someone who created a number called the reproduction number, or RO. Okay, RO means how many research doctorates one doctor produces during his or her lifetime. Okay, so for example, in environmental engineering, every doctor produced somehow, like mentored and supervised, 19 research doctorates throughout his or her lifetime. Okay, so that means that the market got, like the number of eligible doctors was increased by 19 times in 2015 in this particular field. Okay, so that's quite a lot, right? And mining and architectural, those stayed at 1. So for every 1 professor, there was 1 new applicant, so that you could think that applicant could overtake that old person in the future, right? So then it's quite stable. But notice that in none of these fields, the number is lower than 1. Okay, so at least it's like 1 or above, right? So in almost all of these, the market is oversaturated. And you might think that the number of jobs will increase also, but I can promise you that it doesn't increase as quickly as this does. Okay. So basically, the market, especially in engineering, is oversaturated. Okay. I will say though that in many fast developing countries, okay, such as, for example, Brazil and China, countries that have not been, I don't know, super well educated on average, but are now becoming more well educated, those countries still need a lot of PhDs, okay? So if you're interested in PhD and you don't know where to look, you can try one of the fast developing countries, okay? Maybe China is a good choice for you since you live very close, right? Oh, okay, I don't know why that happened, but okay, so another one might be, another reason why you might not want to do a PhD, especially if you're worried about your career prospects like you are, is that you're missing out on multiple years worth of work experience, right? If you do a PhD instead of work, you will not be able to put on your CV that you have worked as a teacher, for example, for 5 years, okay? And for many employers, experience is actually quite a valuable thing, right? In some cases, it's worth more than education, okay? So, what I want to say is that a PhD is not necessarily worth more than the experience you would have gotten if you had spent that time working instead. Then another reason is that because the market is very oversaturated, it's very competitive also, okay? Universities don't really want to educate many more research doctorates than they already do, right? So they want to keep it at a minimum. So that means that you have to be very, very good if you want to do a PhD, right? Maybe you are used to being at the top of your class or having done very well in school. But consider here, most of the applicants are like that, okay? Most people who apply for a PhD are very brilliant. They are very smart and very hardworking, right? So the competition is very high, very, very heavy. So the other side of that is that if you still want to compete here, you have to work hard, okay? I would say that it's not uncommon to work more than 40 hours per week, which is common in many other occupations, right? So you will have to work overtime probably. You should probably expect that. So keep that in mind. And also because of all of these things, because it's so competitive and because the market is oversaturated, there is a risk some universities will use you as cheap, highly motivated, and disposable labor. Okay, so they will abuse you. Because you're desperate to get experience, you're desperate to make contact with professors, you're desperate to make a name for yourself, right? Yeah, so there is a risk that you will be abused because of this, okay? Yeah, it's a employer's market, basically. You're not in charge of what happens. You need them more than they need you, basically. So all of these are reasons why you might not want to pursue a PhD. Some of them are stronger than others, I guess. But still, you should consider all of these things, I think. So with that said, let's go back to this. Okay, the motivation checkpoint. Having heard all of this, how has your score changed? Has it changed at all? Okay. On a scale from 1 to 10, how motivated are you to pursue a PhD or an EDD? So right now, write down a number again. Okay. Could be the same, could also not be the same. Okay, so let me ask you now, did it change?
No.
No, why not?
5 to 5.
Okay.
I don't know, because both why and why not, I will have some reasons for each side. For why, because I want to learn something new or improve myself. But for why not? Because I want to have some work experience, and my self-control is very bad. So and because of that flexibility. So I don't know it's a good thing or bad thing for me.
Yeah, true. Flexibility can also be a bad thing if you don't like that, right?
Yeah.
I put it as a positive, but of course it can also be a negative. Okay. Yeah, so unchanged. Interesting. Is it the same for you?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay,
I
why?
also changed if I gave out the point 7 because all of you just now you mentioned I had considered them. Yeah, and I think the problems and the challenges are not very big challenge to me, and if I know it will be very hard in the future, but I'm willing to overcome them.
Then you're fine.
That's why.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, interesting. So both of you say the same. So that means that my presentation was quite balanced, I think, hopefully. Okay, so now I want to move on to the next part where I sort of give you a timeline of what a general PhD education might look like. But before I do that, I want to tell you that there's a lot of variation in this, okay? So it's different from country to country, from university to university, in terms of these things, okay? So eligibility, as I said earlier, for example, some might require you to have a bachelor's degree, some might require you to have a master's degree. Some might require you to provide references of how good of a student you are, and some might not, and so on, okay? Similarly, for the application, some might ask for things that others do not, okay? Some might ask you for a budget, or some might ask you for a timeline, or some might ask you for your past thesis, and so on, okay? And others might not. So it differs. Types of courses, probably you will be able to take some courses that will help you, but how many of these courses there will be and what types of courses there will be different, okay? Some universities offer courses that will help you in the future when you're a scholar, okay? So like, for example, a research grant writing. While others offer you courses that will help you right now when you're doing your research, okay? So if you're writing about squirrels, again, maybe they will give you a course about ecology or animal rights or something. So it's different. The length of study, I've already mentioned, some will only take 3 years, some will take 6 years, some will take somewhere in between. Amount and type of supervision, maybe in some universities you get feedback every week. Some universities only give you feedback, or like more feedback, but only every month. And as I said earlier, you might have 1 supervisor, or 2 or 3, and so on. Okay, so it's different. Financial support, I already mentioned this also. I guess I mentioned all of these, but financial support, will you have to rely on scholarships? Will you have to rely on money from the government? Will you actually have a salary? And so on. Okay, these are all different depending on the university and the program and the country. And product, well, like what will you actually produce when you're in this program? Okay, mainly I would say there are 2 different types of products. Okay, we have the monograph and the collection of articles. Okay, these are the main types of products that you will create. Okay, so a monograph is basically a book. Okay, so it's you're writing one text, one very long text about one thing. Okay. This is the traditional format. This is what has been used since the start, basically. And compared to a collection of articles, supposedly this is like heavier. This is you're going more in depth, and at least if you do it well, this has more sway. This how should I put it? This gives you more status, I guess, academic status, than a collection of articles. Okay, but there are also pros with a collection of articles. So a collection of articles is around 3 articles on the same theme. Okay, so you're still only dealing with one theme. Okay, but if you're doing a collection of articles, you're dividing it into 3 or so articles instead of just writing one long book. And then usually you'll have a introduction or summary describing how all of these articles fit together. That's called a kappa. Okay, so that's what it is. This is increasingly more common because of the following reasons. Okay, it's faster and more exposure, meaning that if you want to make yourself known as a scholar, then this will allow you to publish your articles before you would be able to do it if you were to write a monograph, right? And you will also be able to publish 3 times rather than just 1 time, right? Another reason is that there's more potential for co-authorship, okay? So writing together with others. And that might be useful because you will create a connection with another scholar, and maybe others will see that, oh, this person is writing together with this very clever person. So that means that that person must also be clever. Like, it gives you some credentiality by association, simply. Yeah, so basically I think a collection of articles is probably the smarter choice if you want to become like a big scholar in the future, if you want to become well known. Okay, if you only care about the subject, if you don't really care about what others think of you, then I think a monograph is better. A problem with a collection of articles is that sometimes it's a bit difficult to divide what you want to say into 3 very neatly separated articles, right? Maybe, for example, again, if you're writing about squirrels, you write most of what you want to say in the first article, and then you don't really have anything to say in the second and third. So that means that these 2 articles are quite difficult to publish, and then maybe you will fail because of that. Maybe your first one is brilliant, but the second and third one are not good. So that's something to consider. It could, depending on what you write about, it could be difficult to divide the content. Yeah, I put these pictures here to sort of symbolize the different types. So in the end, you write approximately the same amount of text, right? It's about this amount of text. And you write about the same theme in both. Here you write about the blue theme or the sitting theme, and here you write about the red sitting theme, right? But here you don't divide the content, but there you do divide the content. Okay. Yeah, so this is something to think about. I think especially early on, okay? Do you want to write a monograph or do you want to write a collection of articles? Okay. Do you care about getting out there, okay, being seen by other scholars and other universities, becoming known basically? Or do you not care about that? Then maybe you should write a monograph, okay? Yeah, so with that said, here's a sample PhD timeline. Of course, this also works for EDD. So I decided to divide it into 4 years. Sometimes, as I said, you will have 5 years and so on. So much of this will be different when you actually do it. But just to give you an idea of what it could look like, probably in year 1, you will have a lot of courses, okay? You will learn about your topic and what it means to actually be a PhD student. And as you go on, the courses will become less and less, and instead probably you will attend conferences, okay? So again, if you're interested in squirrels, maybe you will attend a conference about animals living in trees here, and then a conference about brown animals, and then a conference about rodents, and so on, okay? So different conferences. Usually, especially toward the end, you will have to present something at these conferences, okay? And this is a very good opportunity for you to make your work known, okay? Also a good opportunity for you to network with other scholars and professors and so on. Yeah, so during the first half, you will probably be more focused on courses. while in the second half you'll probably be more focused on conferences and getting your work known. Okay, because obviously in the beginning you don't really have anything to show. Okay, while that's what you have in the second half. And throughout all of these years, you will be working on your big project. Okay, whether it's a monograph or a collection of articles. If you write a monograph, you will do something like this, the green text here. So first you're probably, well, regardless of if you do a monograph or a collection of articles, the first year will probably be dedicated to a literature review. Okay? Do you know what that is? What is a literature review?
Gathering other people's opinions in articles, books, or many resources, and make some critical analysis about their thinking.
Yes.
To generate your own research.
Yes, very good. Basically, you have to read up on the topic. Okay, you have to become knowledgeable in this area. Okay, and much of that happens in the first year. Okay, of course you will also do this later on, but I would say the brunt of it happens during the first year. Okay, that's when you establish your foundation, regardless if you write a monograph or a collection of articles. Then in the second year, if you're running monograph, probably you will dedicate much of that year to gathering data. Okay, here you have sort of decided what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and then here, this is the first time you really get started, right? This is when you start gathering data. So you might, for example, if you're interested in education, you might go to a school and ask the teachers, interview them, or you might do a survey or something like that, right? And then in year 3, you will make something out of that data. Okay, you will analyze it, you will compile it, you will do something with the data, right? And then towards the end, you will summarize all of this in a neat article or a neat monograph. Okay, so you will put all of this into writing in a very nice way, very well phrased way. So basically, that's the flow chart of how to do a monograph. If we do a collection of articles, it's quite similar, but for each year, instead of doing one big thing, you do all of these 3 in small parts instead. Okay, so you will do gathering data, consolidating data, and writing all in 1 year here, and then again all in 1 year here, and then again all in 1 year here, right? A difference though is that at the end you also have to write a kappa, so a summary or introduction which links all of these articles together. Okay, so usually you would write that at the end, right, when you've done everything else. A part of this, there are also some deadlines or some important points you need to be aware of. Let's start from the end. First of all, at the end of your journey, you will have to defend your thesis. Okay, this is a pretty big thing. You will have to defend it publicly, meaning that you can invite guests, and maybe your professor and supervisor will invite guests, and it will be a very big thing. You will have to present your study, and also there will be other knowledgeable people there criticizing your work, and you will have to defend yourself in front of everyone. Okay, and depending on how well you do here, your thesis will pass, or pass with minor corrections, pass with major corrections, or not pass at all. Okay, so that's something that can happen. Alright, before that happens though, halfway, probably you will have to write a halfway report telling the supervisor and the university as a whole how well you're doing, how much of a progress you have made, and if you think you will be able to finish on time, and so on. Okay. Usually there's some kind of report that happens halfway, basically. Okay, research plan. Okay, let's start with the research plan 1. Okay, First,